and this hangout on air is live. Welcome to Tint, the premier free culture sports podcast. We've been thinking for some time about changing the name of the show, and last night I just had the idea, maybe release early, release often. And then the tagline I was a little bit iffy on because that's like an open source thing. But I don't know. I mean, when you start talking about open source, then you start really sort of thinking about software, and
Mhm.
NIF is broader than that, and doesn't. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head if we've had any free software um, articles on Sportazine, but I really want it to be about open licensing more than software. But we could do the free culture community sports podcast or something like that. It's kind of a mouthful for the tagline, but what do you think about the name just in general? Release early, release often.
ReRow would be I guess the acronym.
Yeah,
ReRow. Uh, I like it. Okay. I mean, if you it, I guess I could. No, I wouldn't. I was gonna say I don't really have issues with Tint, but the whole this is not TINAP. Like both of those names don't get at the fact that it's a sports podcast or a sports show. And I didn't know if that was important or not, is to actually say, oh, this is about
yeah,
sports in the
right.
title. So that's
I
what's
mean,
really been bothering me about it.
we could always just go with the Sportazine podcast, but the reason I didn't want to do that is I've been in discussions with another member of the community, a writer that I think has just written one article at this point, but his name's Pete. He lives in Minneapolis, and I was talking to him about maybe doing a baseball show because I don't think either of us is really equipped to do a baseball show. So um, I don't know. So that's been sort of my hesitance. I mean, we could always do that, and then we are the Sportazine podcast, and then it becomes the Sportazine baseball podcast, and the Sportazine this and that if we expand. So that's something we can think about. But the whole reason that we're talking about potentially changing the name is because we've got season 3 coming up, and we're doing a crowdfunding campaign, and we thought, well, with this crowdfunding campaign, there's going to be a lot of exposure. Now is sort of the time to do it if we're going to do it. So the crowdfunding campaign is going. I can't say that it's going well, but it's going, and we're learning. That's a large measure of what this was about, was learning what works and what doesn't. And there's a lot of things that I have purposely not done. Like they say to get a lot of your campaign dollars up front, like from friends and family, and that way, lock it all in. But I haven't asked any family to participate because I feel like if I need money, I could just ask them for money instead of like a 5% or 9%, depending on whether we make it or not, surcharge going to Indiegogo. So um, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. We still got 2 more weeks left. Well, a little bit over 2 more weeks in the campaign, so maybe we'll get over the line. Um, but if people want to check that out, the crowdfunding campaign, they can do that at igg.me/at/FCSS. So there's a long URL as well. It's indiegogo.com/project/this is not TINAP Tint Season 3 with a bunch of dashes in there, but that's much longer than the short URL. So main event again this week is going to be World Cup, but I do have a few things that I want to talk about. And actually, we've got some notes here on the Champions League qualifiers that are coming up, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But if people want to join me, where I'll be doing my commentary on the World Cup for the round of 16 and going forward, uh, I'm using Pumpio, and there's a link in the show notes. It's fmrl.me. There's a lot of different um, instances that people can sign up for, but that's where Pump World Cup is being hosted. So I actually didn't start that. Dylan, another writer for the site, he's been covering our Australia games, and I think he's got some games going forward. Anyway, he set that up, and so I've been trying to promote that with him. So if other people want to join that, they are welcome to do that. Big news, at least as far as I'm concerned. DC United will be on the MLS Stream of the Week this week. I don't know if I'm technically in the DC viewing area, because if I am, that means it will be blocked out for me. So I hope I'm not in this case. It's also going to be blacked out in the Seattle viewing area because DC United plays the Seattle Sounders at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, this Saturday when we're recording, June 28th. So I'm going to try to get this out before the noon game, the first World Cup game today. And if I do that and people listen, then they can check that out on the live stream. So on MLSsoccer.com/TV, there'll be a link to the stream of the week, but it's MLSsoccer.com/stream-of-the-week if you want to go directly to the game. And I mentioned in here too that it's not the only league that's playing during the World Cup. The Alvin Scan gets started on July 5th. There's some other leagues too. Not worth going into a lot of that. Other than Champions League and Europa League qualifying starts on July 1st. And Malmo plays FK Vitspil. I don't know who they are. And Celtic plays some team with a bunch of characters that the URL string can't recognize.
They're Icelandic, so good luck with that.
The team that Celtic plays?
Yes.
Yeah, the Not Spitteroflinga Rakajagatkor.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I'm sure I pronounced that exactly perfect.
They will probably take KR or RFC.
Yeah. So, but you posed the question: do teams from smaller leagues ever have a chance, and what is their purpose in the Champions League? So my question back to that is, what is the definition of a smaller league in this case?
I was thinking more of when you look at the UEFA coefficient, the teams that only get like the champion in, so they only get their one team as opposed to England that gets 4 teams. Those leagues that are like maybe 15 below, 18 below, do they ever really have a chance of going through this gauntlet of the first, second qualifying round, making it all the way to like the quarterfinals, the semifinals? We looked at the finals just to see who had made the finals, and I mean, Porto was won it in 2004, but I wouldn't consider Portugal, the Portuguese league, a small league.
Okay, that's what I was getting. I mean, they're not one of the big 5 traditionally, so.
Well, I was thinking more like if you go back to, I guess, Yugoslavian team in 1990, that would be what I considered a small league, probably.
Yeah. And then I was noticing in '89, Bucharest, or Stoia Bucharest, the team that Chelsea played last year, the Champions League out of Romania, they made it to the final in '89, and they also won it in '86. So the late '80s, at least for that one club, was a powerful time in Romanian football.
But it's gotten more. At that time, world football was what it was, but now it's so much money into it, and there's so much money into the big teams at the big leagues, comparative to what's Malmo's budget, or how much can Malmo spend per year versus how much can Chelsea spend per year.
Yeah, I mean, it's not comparable.
And that's why I think that a Swedish team never has a chance, because the odds are just completely stacked against them before they even step on the field or even have the draw.
Yeah, but I mean, even if Malmo can just make it to the group stages, that is like huge bank for them.
Okay, that was my second question: is what is their purpose? What is their reason for wanting to be in the Champions League? And it is money for each stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, that they get money for each stage. It was, I think, just participating in the qualification for Europa League, you get like £250,000 or euros or something, and that's the Europa League. I saw that recently. So, and I don't know how the money stacks up going forward, but certainly making the knockout stages of the Champions League is huge money. Now, I don't know if it's going to be a while, if ever, that Malmo is going to be able to make the knockout stages, but they can make the group stages, I think, potentially. I mean, um, they, I think they drew with Swansea in one of their legs last year. I'd have to double check that, but they played Swansea really well one time. And then when they played them at home, like the first goal went in, and then they just sort of capitulated. I mean, it was like, okay, we have a fighting chance at home, and then once they gave up a goal, they just didn't happen at all for them. I think they ended up losing like 4-0 or something in the return leg. But if they could put together a string of a couple matches, and just even being in those qualifiers, like they're getting more money, and they can make a run at it. So who knows? Um, and I don't know, like in the qualification, when any of the teams go to the Europa League. So that's something too. I think at some point, like after the group stage, teams go into the Europa League, but I think during qualification, teams might go into the Europa League too. I'm not sure of that off the top of my head, but
Yeah, I'd have to take another look at that. You are right. The first time, or maybe no, the second leg, Malmo drew 0-0 with Swansea.
it was the first leg that they drew 0-0.
Well, then Wikipedia needs to be on it because they've got it backwards. I thought it was the first leg too. I have to double check that and help them out there.
Yeah, I don't know. The fact is they got blown out in the other leg. So
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, and to an extent, it's like the same thing that FIFA is doing with moving the World Cup to countries that haven't had it or shouldn't have it potentially. Brazil maybe doesn't follow that. I mean, the airports and stuff have had problems, and the stadiums, or some of the stadiums, never got finished. Like the roof on one of the stadiums was never finished. But Brazil has had it before, and they're a football power, and I don't think that's a huge issue. But South Africa, people have their doubts about, and certainly Qatar, people have their doubts about, and Russia, people have their doubts about, considering all the racial abuse that happens in Russia. So, that's sort of FIFA wanting to spread it around, and UEFA wants to bring up the smaller countries. So they just redid the qualification to make it easier for teams to make it into the group stages. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Mm-hmm. I was not.
Yeah, so I think it was last year, but they split it up into a champions bracket and a non-champions bracket, and the reason.
I did remember reading about that, but I didn't know that was anything new. I guess I just didn't know
Yeah,
that beforehand.
it's fairly new. I think it was just totally based on coefficient before, and then so like the Arsenals of the world just sort of plowed through, and now it makes it easier for like actual champions to make it into the Champions League. I do find it very ironic that it used to be the European Cup and they had only champions in it. Now it's the Champions League and it has people other than champions. In fact, the last few winners have not been champions. So Chelsea, Bayern Munich, and Madrid were all not champions of their league when they won the Champions League. So, just a funny little tidbit there. But all right, let's move on. Oh, um, so the same question could be asked about of things other than the Champions League, like for instance March Madness. The 16 seeds get in. I'd say that's a similar sort of thing. Like you want to give those conferences some love so they get in, basically.
That's true. Yeah, I mean that's true. They used to be also kind of the same way, where the conference champions would be the only ones that
Right.
could be in. And so now you have that same dilemma where you have teams like Connecticut winning the national championship when they didn't. Well, they may have won the American this year. I'm not going to overspeak, but chances are teams that win the national championship didn't necessarily win their conference championship, just because
Right.
that would mean they
Well,
would have had to win like, you know, 9, 10 games in a row to end the season, and you just don't see that very often.
well, and it depends on whether you mean the regular season or the conference tournament too, whether or not they're the conference champion. So, and the same thing can be said about the World Cup. CONCACAF, Asia, Oceania, and Africa have never won the World Cup. So theoretically, it should just be South America and Europe that play for the World Cup. I mean,
Well,
if you just
yeah.
look at the winners.
How far did Mexico get? Have they played for the in the finals
I don't think they've ever made it to the quarterfinal or past the quarterfinals. Actually,
ever? I'd have to double check that. I thought they did. I thought they had a deep run one time, but I may be, you know, speaking
they
way.
they have deep runs in the Copa America sometimes, even though they're not in South America. They get invited to their tournament, and they've made the finals of that at least
Okay.
twice. So, um, but yeah, so maybe we can figure that out and get that in the show notes. So, World Cup predictor here. Your Men in Blazers vision is tied for first. I checked to see if like Patriot was doing the Men in Blazers vision. I didn't know what their vision was, if this was the
Well, their
defending.
vision was Clint Dempsey, taking the cup from Sepp Blatter and raising it up, and
Right, but
that was their
so
vision.
but that was it. It wasn't like here's the tournament. I mean, because they're doing that World Cup cupcakes thing or World
Yeah,
Cupcakes or whatever it is. So um, I didn't know if you had just done what they said all the way through or not. So, but that was not the one that you thought was going to happen, and I have to say, it
no.
seems unlikely that the U.S. would be champion. So, and then another person tied, and I checked to see if they were the exact same brackets, and they weren't. But Patriot 8089, who I don't know who that is, but they also have U.S. winning it all and are tied with you on 23 points. So.
Hmm.
And then I have 19 points. Whitney has 18 points. Eric also has 18 points. Your like bracket that you're saying is your real bracket has 17 points, and you're tied with Dylan. And then I made a bracket that was just totally based on FIFA rankings, and that bracket has 16 points. So, and that bracket's champion is already out. So the FIFA rankings are gonna nosedive in the standings as time goes on. So
I think you know. I'm, it's surprising when we get to the World Cup pick'em. Um, I topped the group, but yet my brackets didn't do very well. So I'm thinking if I had actually picked my bracket based on how I picked the pick'em games, uh, how they would have actually matched up. Like, did I, do the pick'em games in a way where my bracket didn't make sense? Like, did I pick,
yeah,
Mexico to beat Croatia, but I didn't in the pick or in the bracket did I pick Croatia making it through the group? Like, did I just do something like that? And chances are I did because I did the bracket like a month ago or two
yeah.
months.
I mean, mine are similarly like my bracket's doing pretty well, but my pick'em is not. I mean, that's because I picked so many like draws basically, and so I
Mm-hmm.
just thought teams would make it out of their group with draws basically, and there haven't been a lot of draws. So I've got the Mexico FIFA World Cup competitive record here, and they made it to the quarterfinals in 1970 when they hosted. They made it to the quarterfinals in 1986 when they also hosted, and that is the best that they've ever done. So they've never done any better. I mean, they've done better than the U.S. in that they've made it to the quarterfinals twice, and the U.S. has only done it once. I mean, unless you count 1930 when it was a completely different tournament. But so yeah,
I thought maybe they had done better when they hosted it. So probably because they were hosting it, I thought they did better than they actually.
yeah, yeah. So one of the few countries that's hosted it twice, Mexico. But the reason for that is because I believe it was Colombia was supposed to host it in '86, and they couldn't get it together. So they sent it to Mexico since I guess it hadn't been in CONCACAF, um, and it had just been in Europe and just been in South America before that. So Mexico got the nod, and that's why CONCACAF had it in '86 and '94 both because it wasn't really supposed to be CONCACAF's turn in '86. So, um, all right. So I have my 16 matchups. I couldn't find a second chance pick'em. Like last time they did that, maybe it just didn't, or not a pick'em, but the bracket, a second chance bracket. Maybe last time people didn't sign up. I mean, there was only a day. I mean, it's not quite 2 days, so but almost 48 hours in between the two games. But it would have, not given people a lot of time to sign up. So you can see all of my picks. You said you picked all of the.
This was for
All
the
of the
next round, for the round of
yeah
16,
for the
the pick 'em.
all of the God, I'm losing track of the word.
Not
All the
the
favorites.
not well. I don't know
The
in what
favorites.
sense they're the favorites, other than the ones that most people are picking.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
But
basically, do you want to go through these game by game here?
I'm sure I'll have to pull up my list here. Then okay.
Well, I think they're gonna be exactly the same as mine because I just looked at mine and I think that's not what I decided I was gonna do, but that's basically what it turned out to be. So I have Brazil over Chile,
As do I.
Colombia over Uruguay,
As do I.
France over Nigeria,
Yep.
Germany over Algeria,
Yep.
Netherlands over Mexico.
Hmm.
I have Costa Rica over Greece. I think this is a toss-up. I basically was like, well, Costa Rica is used to playing in, hot and humid conditions, so
Hmm.
that's why I picked them. So, Argentina over Switzerland,
Yep.
and then U.S. over Belgium,
Yep.
which Belgium are technically the favorites, but it's
Yeah.
pretty close.
I think at least on like
And
the. Yep. You still there?
yeah,
At, at least on like the, I guess the ESPN percentage picked, the United States is the closest underdog, and I don't know if that's just because of the United States bias or not. There's probably something to that. But then next is Greece and Costa Rica. So you said that one was the most likely a toss up. But it's
yeah.
still not even close between what people are picking. Like it's a dramatic difference in all of these games, including the that Greece Costa Rica game. I mean, Algeria at Germany. You can barely see like maybe 2% of people picked Algeria over Germany.
That's funny because a bunch of people on GNU Social were talking about how good Algeria was and how they were better than the U.S. I'm not convinced. I think they had a pretty weak group, but I guess
Yes,
we'll see.
I mean they got through what I would call maybe the weakest group. Um,
Yeah.
Deciding on if it's that group or the Colombia Greece group. Um, but they got through that with four points. Uh, so I mean, depends on how much you value Russia and South Korea, which neither team looked that outstanding.
Yeah. So we already touched on this, but just on the pick'em, I don't really have a lot to say about it other than you're at the top right now, so I don't even know. I guess the points will increase as the as it progresses, or do you know, or is it just like the same amount of points per pick?
At least in the round of 16, they're 2 points apiece. So I don't know if it's going to keep doubling or if these are just going to stay at 2 points apiece now. Um, so that
Oh,
would
so
be
it was 1 point in the group stage.
yes. It was 1 point in the group stage out of
How many games are there in the group stage?
I don't know. The highest person got 39. Let's see. There should be six per group, and there's 8 groups, so 48.
Okay, so better than half.
Mhm. So there'd
I
be
on the other.
48 points there, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Only 16 points in the round of 16, and then I guess there would be 16 points
Probably
throughout
gonna
the
double.
final.
Yeah. So Well, yeah. So our next show is gonna be Monday, July 7th. So not our normal Saturday showtime. It's gonna be at the same 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern time though. So we'll have more to say about the standings at that point because the quarterfinals will be over at that
Yeah,
point, right?
it should
So
be.
we'll be pretty far into the brackets and into the pick'em as well. And on that show, we'll preview the semifinal and the final. There's too many games for us to do a real preview in this short show here. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about? Do you want to do a little more preview of the Belgium U.S. game before we go, or?
I was gonna write some in an article. I'm still having to write up the Belgium South Korea game, and at this point, it's just gonna turn into a talking about how Belgium did in the group stage. Um, they haven't looked great. This goes back to what we said about Algeria only getting 4 points out of that group. They haven't looked great, but their defense has been pretty steady. I think they've only given up 1 goal in 3 games, and the U.S. has given up 4 goals. So defense is doing better than the United States. They haven't been scoring a whole lot. In fact, a lot of their goals have come late.
Of course, one of those U.S. goals was complete BS. So, I mean, it's a goal. I mean, it wasn't like a bad call. It was just like, come on.
Yeah. Um, and Belgium, they're missing a player who got a red card, but he's usually coming off the bench anyway. They were already through, so they kind of played some backups. They just don't scare me. Fellaini is tall, but not a very good midfielder.
He used to be. I mean, I don't think he's a bad midfielder. I just think he
No,
had a bad
he's
year.
not a bad midfielder. He's just not a great midfielder. Um, the only player that really scares me is Eden Hazard. He frightens me to death in this game, at least. I've said the United States will win 1-0. I think in my U.S. article I said with a goal by Michael Bradley in like the 77th minute. Um,
You know, Bradley has been getting a lot of stick from people, but I saw that he has covered more miles in the World Cup, more distance than
yeah,
anyone else for any team. So,
I, I think because he hasn't created a chance, and I'm like, that's BS. If you've seen how much he's run around the field, defending, making passes in the final third, like he has been all over the place. Give the guy some slack.
yeah, but his touch was really bad in the Germany game, but it was also like a flood.
Yeah,
So,
I don't
it
know how
was
that
that
game
was a it
with
was
that
an
much
ugly
ball.
game.
Yeah,
So,
his touch hasn't been great. I mean, he's been tired because he gave up the ball easy against Portugal, leading to that final goal. His passing and decision making weren't very great in the Ghana game. Um, so he hasn't played his best yet, but he has been running around doing a bunch of everything. I think
yeah.
to say like he hasn't been playing well is harsh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think he's played well, but who are you going to replace him with? That's
Yeah.
the real question. I mean, I think you got to leave him in there. I mean, maybe you could get him some rest at the end of games or something. I
Well,
mean,
there was an article, it might be on ESPN. I'm not sure who wrote it. The domino effect of missing Altidore and the extra um, responsibility that puts on Dempsey and Bradley, especially. And I think if we had an Altidore or something, and Dempsey played a little bit, deeper, then Bradley could play more comfortably. I think he's got so much responsibility on this team right now
yeah,
that he is going to make mistakes. I mean, he drops back to the defensive line to receive the ball in possession, but he's also one of like the 2 or 3 players at the edge of the 18 trying to make something happen. So he is just going up and down the field. So he's going to make mistakes with that many touches and that many opportunities.
no. So the last thing I saw on Josie is that no decision had been made. Is that what the last thing that you've seen?
Yeah, I've heard optimistic, which that word scares me because if you're optimistic, then that means that you're thinking you're hoping for good things, as opposed to we think it's going to happen. So I think that's
Right.
a nice way of saying it could happen, but and we're hoping it does, but it's probably not. I mean, if he can give you 20 minutes, I hate to do this, but if he can give you 20 minutes. Um, at the beginning of the game using a sub that early. I hate to do it because I think that's what cost
I would say
Atletico
just
in the Champions League.
plan to take him to put him in late in the game is what I would say.
Yeah,
I mean, just flip that.
yeah, I
I
would
mean,
put him.
if you're expecting 20 minutes, then if things are going well, then you don't have to put him in. You don't have to risk him. But if you know you're only going to get 20 minutes, just wait and see what happens. That's what I say.
On the flip side of that, though, I'd say if you think he can give you 20 minutes and he can only give you 10, if you try to sub him in at the 70th minute and then you'd have to take him off again at the 80th and you use two subs. Um,
Well, but yeah, I guess.
so
Is that using two subs late worse or better than using a sub in the 20th minute? I don't. I guess it just depends on the situation.
yeah, I mean you can ask Atletico about making that early sub
Right.
too.
Well, and that wasn't even 20 minutes. That was like 9 minutes.
Yeah,
So,
they could have used that sub late too.
yeah. Well, I think the U.S. is probably going to be in that situation just because
Yeah.
of the games and the heat. So, I don't know.
Okay.
So, like I said before, we will be back on Monday, July 7th. You should check out our crowdfunding campaign at igg.me/at/FCSS. That's igg.me/at/FCSS. This has been Tint, the premier free culture sports podcast.